My name's Lucy. My brother Peter, he was 39 years old. He was 12 years older than me, so very much my big brother. Very boisterous, very loud, very funny, and we have a brother in between us who has quite severe learning difficulties, so he lives in care. So Peter saw him every Saturday without fail, and he was just so much fun to be around. He loved horse racing as well, so he visited every horse racing place in the UK apart from Perth in Scotland, and he was saving that for his 40th birthday, but he never made it to 40. Well, on the Friday I'd been texting my brother during the working day because we'd been buying our dad's Christmas present, and he'd actually transferred me his half of the money for once, like that day. And I'd said something to him like, oh, that makes a change. It was really, I wish I'd known it was going to be our last contact. I'd gone out with my dad and I'd actually bought Peter's Christmas presents. I'd got him some aftershave he'd wanted and some cufflinks that were like horse and jockey. And I was so excited to give them to him because I knew he was going to really love them. And he'd been out with my brother and done some Christmas shopping with him and then dropped him off. And then on the evening I started to feel really anxious. I don't know why. I could not sleep. I got up in the middle of the night and my mum was sitting up downstairs and she said, oh, I feel really anxious, and I was like, so do I? And it was just really odd. And then about 7 o'clock in the morning the door knocked, Sunday morning, and I remember thinking, I haven't got any deliveries due and I haven't slept very well, so I'm not getting out of bed for who on earth this is, and I kind of rolled over, and then it knocked again and I was thinking, that's strange, and then my landline rang, and I was thinking, who rings a landline nowadays? Like, it never rings. So I ran downstairs and answered it, and my uncle had been really poorly, so I was sort of half expecting it to be my auntie, but it wasn't. It was my dad, and he said, like, I'm at the front door, can you please answer the front door? And I knew that seemed really odd. Answered the front door and my dad was just like ashen, and I knew that somebody had died. He didn't have to say a word, but I was listing everybody, like, is my stepmom okay? Is my other brother okay? Is uncle so-and-so okay? And then just had this dawning realisation that I hadn't asked if Peter was okay, because he was fit and healthy and everything was fine with him. And I just started to feel sick, and I remember saying, Dad, is Peter okay? Is Peter okay? And he could not answer that question. So I just changed my question to, is Peter alive? So I knew that he was dead. And then we were just told that he'd been walking home on the road that he lived on, and he'd been hit by a car, and there might be a speeding issue, but it needed to be investigated. And then obviously when it all did come to light, he'd crossed on a crossing and he'd been hit by a driver who fled the scene and stopped a third of a mile away to switch seats with his girlfriend. She was a lot younger than him, and he sort of coerced her into switching seats because she was insured and he wasn't. And then they rang the police and said they thought they'd hit a dog. So I remember on the day we were all really concerned about my other brother and how we were going to tell him, because he lives in care. We had to sit in a room at the care home, and he'd been wrapping his Christmas presents. So he came running down the stairs like, oh, my dad and my sister are here on a surprise visit and I've wrapped all my Christmas presents ready. And we were like, can you put those down? Can you just sit for a minute? And he kept asking us that, but we can go and see him in the hospital then. And we had to keep saying no, because he's not in the hospital, he's died. Yeah, but we can go and visit him and they'll make him better. And it was like, no, we've got to make you understand this. And then because of his learning difficulties, every Saturday for months, he got up, he put his coat on and he waited in the porch for his brother to come and collect him, like he always did. So every Saturday it was like going through it again, like, he's not going to come for you, Rob, anymore. I lost loads of weight. I went back to work, but I just wasn't talking, wasn't functioning, felt really angry inside. Also couldn't relate to my friends because they were all the same age, like 27, and nobody had been through anything like that. So I didn't want to go to the pub or to the club or anything, just felt very isolated. My dad got diagnosed with Parkinson's, which I'm sure was triggered. You know, I obviously can't prove that, but I'm sure that it was like a traumatic thing. It took us 18 months to get through the court case, and that felt like a lifetime. And I know that nowadays that's probably quite quick. But it was awful because you're just in the dark all that time, and people think you're not telling them the full story. They don't realise that you don't actually know. You're waiting for the police to be able to tell you. And nobody spoke to me about support. There was nothing offered to me, and I was just trying to cope, and I wasn't doing very well, in all honesty. And then actually at the end of the court case, my dad heard something about RoadPeace, and he happened to go to the National Memorial Arboretum on the day that they have their annual service. So he came back with leaflets and was like, I've heard of this organisation, the service was really beautiful. So I joined as a member purely because I felt like, oh, if I can give a direct debit, like that's a way to remember my brother. And then they emailed and said they were going to start a support group in this region, and so Dad and I went, and we were like, oh, I don't know about this, because you're sitting in a room with strangers, it's not really our thing. But on the very first meeting, there's a lady there called Elaine, and she'd lost her sister about 3 weeks after Peter had been killed. She'd had a delay in the funeral, we'd had a delay in the funeral, and we just like clicked. And for me, it was like all this weight came off because there was somebody that actually understood. Obviously, I wish that I didn't have to meet any of the families that I've met, because I'd rather not be bereaved, and I'd certainly rather they weren't. It's okay that they feel like everything's falling apart, like there's nothing wrong with them. Something terrible's happened to them, and they can't expect themselves to just be bouncing back. Sometimes families will say thank you to me, and I just won't have it, because actually if I didn't have them to help, I don't know where I'd be. So it's very much a mutual thing. Every road death is preventable. It's not an accident. Even if there's not a culpable driver, there's usually actions that could have been taken to stop it. And particularly, you know, my brother's case, it was extreme speeding. It's so reckless, and I don't know truly if that was the first time the driver had done that, or whether he'd done it before and he'd just been lucky before. Just think about the consequences, because it's a split second on the day that you do it, but the ramifications are with the families we support forever. And we have people in our service who lost their loved ones 40, 50 years ago, and they still need help, and they're still trying to process the trauma. You know, your loved one went out one day and never came home, and no one can ever be prepared for that.